I was born in chaos. Before I became emperor, before I unified the land, before history gave me a name that would echo across millennia, I was a boy surrounded by enemies. You know me as Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, but I was not born an emperor. I was not born powerful. I was not born safe. I was born a hostage. I entered the world in 259 BCE during an age of relentless war. The land you now call China was not one nation but many. Rival kingdoms locked in endless struggle for survival. Qin, Zhao, Wei, Han, Chu, Yan, and Qi, each state armed, each ruler ambitious, each border stained with blood. My father was a prince of Qin, yet when I was young he lived not in triumph, but as a political hostage in the rival state of Zhao. I grew up beside him, not in a palace of comfort, but in a foreign land where we were watched, mistrusted, and quietly despised. I learned early that power was fragile. When Qin armies defeated Zhao forces, anger fell upon us, for we were living symbols of the enemy. Survival required silence. Survival required restraint. Survival required the careful study of fear, both the fear in others and the fear within myself. I watched how easily hatred could be stirred, how quickly order could collapse. I learned a truth that never left me. Weakness invites destruction. When I was 13 years old, my father died, and I became king of Qin. I was a child crowned in a world that devoured the unprepared. Real authority belonged to regents, ministers, and generals who governed in my name, but I observed everything. I watched how alliances shifted behind smiles. I listened to whispers in corridors. I studied how states rose and how rulers were controlled by those who claimed to serve them. I would not remain a puppet. When I came of age, I seized power for myself. It was not a gentle transition. Court intrigue gave way to decisive action. Those who sought to dominate the throne were removed. Rival influences were cut away. Authority was centralized. Loyalty was enforced. Some would later call these acts ruthless. But I had seen what hesitation produced, vulnerability and collapse. To rule in an age of chaos, mercy without strength was merely another form of surrender. Once power was secure within Qin, I turned outward. For generations, my predecessors had strengthened the state through discipline, reform, and relentless organization. Qin did not rely on noble birth alone. Rank was earned through achievement. Laws were strict, administration was efficient, war was approached not as spectacle but as calculation. The dream of Qin was not merely survival, the dream of Qin was unification. I did not wage war for glory, I waged war to end war. One by one, campaigns were launched against the rival states. Strategy, patience, and preparation guided every advance. Han fell first, its defenses overcome by sustained pressure. Zhao followed, the very land where I had lived as a hostage. Then Wei. Each victory reshaped the balance of power across the central plains. Qin's strength did not lie solely in numbers, but in structure. Discipline, organization, and the promise of advancement through merit forged an army that moved with singular purpose. Chu, vast and proud, resisted fiercely. Its territory was immense, its forces formidable. Conquering Chu required time, persistence, and overwhelming resolve. But even Chu could not withstand the momentum of a unified strategy. It fell. Yan was subdued. Qi, isolated and facing inevitable defeat, surrendered. In 221 BCE, the centuries of division that had defined our world came to an end. The warring states were no more. For the first time in history, the land stood unified under a single ruler. Under me, a king rules a realm among others, but I ruled all under heaven. The title of king was no longer sufficient to describe the authority I held. I created a new title, Huangdi, Emperor, and I became Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of Qin. I believed this empire would endure for 10,000 generations, but conquest alone could not secure permanence. Unity demanded transformation. To prevent the return of chaos, the empire had to function as one body. Weights and measures were standardized so trade could flow without confusion. Currency was unified so value would be understood everywhere. The writing system was standardized so officials and subjects across distant regions could communicate clearly. Road networks spread across the land, linking territories that had once been enemies. I reorganized the realm into administrative regions governed not by hereditary nobles, but by appointed officials accountable to the central authority. Power would no longer fragment along ancestral lines. It would flow from the center, from the throne, from me. You may say my rule was severe, yet I had witnessed centuries in which disorder consumed entire generations. Stability required clarity. The philosophy guiding my governance was simple. Strong laws create strong states. Laws were defined. Punishments were harsh. Authority was unquestioned. Unity was preserved not by sentiment but by structure. I ordered the suppression of texts that promoted rival political doctrines. I sought intellectual unity alongside political unity. History would judge this act harshly, but in my mind, conflicting visions of governance threatened to fracture the stability I had built. I had seen what division produces. I chose control over uncertainty. To defend the northern frontier from incursions, I commanded the connection and expansion of defensive walls built by earlier states. Across mountains and plains, fortifications rose. Roads, canals, and infrastructure projects spanned vast distances. The empire demanded immense labor. Hundreds of thousands worked to reshape the land itself. The scale was unprecedented, but I believed permanence required effort beyond ordinary limits. Even as I constructed an empire for the living, I prepared for death. Beneath the earth, an immense tomb complex was built, a reflection of the world above. Within it stood an army of clay soldiers, each unique, each positioned in silent formation. They were created to guard me in eternity, as real armies had guarded me in life. I had unified the world I knew, yet one realm remained beyond my command. Time. As years passed, a new fear grew within me, not of rebellion, not of invasion, but of mortality itself. I sought elixirs of immortality. I sent expeditions in search of distant lands rumored to hold the secret of eternal life. I believed that if order were to endure, I must endure with it. But even emperors cannot command time. The substances prescribed for longevity may have hastened my end rather than prevented it. In 210 BCE, while traveling through the eastern regions of my empire, my life came to its close. Those around me concealed my death temporarily, fearing unrest if news spread too quickly. Even in death, the question that had shaped my entire life remained unresolved. Would unity survive without me? Rebellions arose not long after. The dynasty I founded did not endure for many generations, yet something greater than a dynasty had already taken root. The idea of a unified realm persisted. The structure of centralized rule endured. The identity of a single civilization, governed under one authority, survived the man who had imposed it. Some remember me as a tyrant, others as a visionary. Some recall the harshness of my laws, others remember the permanence of my achievement. But consider the world I inherited, a land divided by endless war, and the world I left behind. A unified empire whose foundations would shape history for thousands of years. I did not rule with gentleness. I ruled with purpose. I feared disorder more than I feared judgment, and so I imposed unity with unwavering force. Judge me as you will, but remember the world before me and the world after. I am Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor, and though my life ended, the empire I forged changed history forever.